StarLore. The prophecy. All was still until Ain heard a voice telling him that he was wanted to be seen by Daci's king Capital Steeds in Capital Steeds, the steel city of the moon. It was the king apparently, going on about how he thinks Ain is the grand lizard lord, yet unseeable to this realm, as per some lizard magic, as he is supposedly the creator, and all visit or await to see the king, as to ask inevitably if he is this such lord, as per why there is none, and only lizard lords and lord lizards. So it is probably just the throned king alone all day seeking the best for counsel, thus each other wait all day to see one another, to question who really is the grand lizard lord. He thought he went mad until they just telepathically conversed off, because it is just funny, really more just a doing of the lizards. So he just wanders around all day, because he's realised soon enough that others read that he alone is summoned by the lone king, whether for true reason or not, and so they pester him to be vast in travelling. This was also because many knew Ain was already the master prophet, the grand creator, the one who saw the creation of existence and lived to tell the tale. It was all like he was just pondering one day, and then he realised that he thought of the world so great that he ought to just find the creator to validate its existence. But when he did, he saw that the creator created the world using him, and he exists now in Ain, happy. It could all be a false vision, but who else claims to see how it was better created in the first place? One day he awoke to only feel the need to rekindle his strength by remembering the way in which he understands the world. Earth is merely a fraction of this realm, and all outside on the moon are different creator realms, and the Archon came from outer space, from one of these realms, and have begun to terraform the Earth, bringing magic through their pyres and the massively growing trees. It reminds him of the stars, as the stars are each realms that are being reflected in the sky by the light of the sun, and how there are many other life forms and habitats. Remembering had got him thinking that what if the Creator thought of himself as Lizard Lord, or other people did, but possibly considering the things he had to do is probably just a stress, though stress is just angst, and that is merely Ain, thus also why the solemn king demands Ain to calm him. He thought he ought to see the king and query with him about whether or not this was the case, as per his will to seek Ain, who is supposedly who the Creator embodied, and thus granted insight and wisdom to then think he is also the Creator. Whether or not they are two different individuals, it doesn't matter, because the Creator based himself upon the Prime Seer, the Grand Seer, Master Prophet, the one best in the image of the Creator. Aim was always the best seer. Or maybe this is what they just think instead of thinking that they're in a digital simulation of some kind. As he got up, he noticed the television still on the dashboard of a movie selection. He turned it off and went outside. He was in Dacity, in the suburban streets, and the sun hung low in the sky for the early morning. It marked him as he left his sandstone home, from there until he got to the neighbouring market area. There were all goods displayed, from fresh fruits to crafts. Ain hurried past and continued up a steep hill that slowly rose to the Capitol building. He passed all manner of concrete buildings and old brick structures, but eventually came to the start of the trapezoidal ramp that held the arching pyramid Capitol building. As he ascended, the city grew lower from him, and the breeze quickened, and the pillars on the top of the ramp came closer, and he noticed the brilliant neon cyan hues of the sky. When he reached the top, it was like a shift in dimensions, suddenly being on an elevated building, flat and motionless now on it from a climbing ramp ascend. There was pillars that were Romanesque in style, and they were old and cracked, and had moss in long thick strands hanging from the borders of the columns, and the stones laid atop them, that all led to the building, as the pillars lined the walk path. Eventually Ain came to a lavishly engraved two-door that held great circle ring doorknobs, though nonetheless he noticed he could just push the door open. Inside was dark, but it was lit by torch scones that disappeared into the distance, as did the crackling compared to the starkly visible ones near Ain. The softest orange glow emanated from the torches as their flames wicked about from the ajar door. Aang closed the door tightly and continued through the echoing hallway until he came to a grand room held up by a series of large, bulging columns that were finely polished and flicked streaks upon the eye of Sion in the dark vicinity of the darkly cascading room. He hurried upon a silver-stranded rug that conjoined at the eye as he followed so long. Beside him, the mirroring of the columns disappeared in the dark that was unlit from the array of torches held upon the columns on the left and right, every several columns. The place generated enormous ambience that made Aang's skin tingle as he could feel the presence of King now not so heavily in his mind. He looked up, and amongst the days of silver carpet and marble columns with the magical blue streaks within lit by the soft orange torches, Aang saw the silhouette of the king in his throne upon 3 raised steps. As he walked closer, the ambient dark was lit away by the fires erupting casually from 2 great braziers that sat either side of the king. "Speak," the king bellowed. But it wasn't met. Instead, Aang approached the stairs that led up to the podium-like elevation and just began to question him about whether the creator is the Lizard Lord because of all the stress he must endure trying to save the world from being a digital simulation, more or less as foreseen by Aang. "Aha," the king's response. "As per why I had begun to call upon you, because you have come to know that this could all be a simulation inside someone's head, or a digital experience." Aang looked puzzled, because he thought that it were true that time in fact was not linear, but dynamic, and he knew that he could be from the future, being an envoy for the type of world in which to create. And he deems the way in which the world is now to be sufficient enough to ensure it's kept alive, when in the past the world was devoid of magic and love. Aang answered, "Sure, it could be, but we could just be imaginations in the future, trying to tell the past how it should be." Steeds replied, "Yes, indeed. Thus we ought to just live and feel." Aang smirked as he said, "Just don't talk to me about lizards." And so they talked about all manner of things, even of the grand lizard lord that doesn't exist. Many people came throughout the day, but the king just told them to go, as he does with most, because that's all they need, a reason to go. When Aang left, the sun was on the other side, and was not as late in the evening as it was early when he came, which created a nice colouring array from the soon-to-set sun. When he returned back home, everything was fine as it had been before, hearing the voice of the king calling him. Drone nestled in its containment, rifle on the workbench, pots on the stove, devices awaiting play, and a soft bed to relax in. A red glow spawned in the dark corner of the room. "Hi." It was the drone greeting Aang, to which he replied, "Hey, I'm just chilling for now." And the drone quietly went back to sleep. A standard issue beta drone, to be precise. Long limbs and a pointed head armor that went back like a pointed hood from its face, which had a single eye, and 3 stacked those spaced horizontal slits for a mouse speaker, and golden bronze armor that gleamed in the dance of lights from all the gadgets in the room. Aang laid back down in bed to rest his head, and thought about all the things he talked about with the king, the different cities and alliances and his perception of them, the different regions and terrains of the world, and also what exists outside, going on about how we exist in here as a training camp for the outer space world, where there are all sorts of wars and convergences. Crazy nonsense, when there is enough to do throughout the world, though it explains where the Archon came from and what they're doing with this reality by making the trees bigger again, like in the outside world, and put why they were cut down in the first place as a message to leave generously. Small white flowers everywhere on a hedge lined the cottage Aang had come to find himself in. It was an old cottage, pre-Arconian, completely run down, though the time had made it look quaint regardless. Moss climbed most of the walls, as vines lay everywhere amongst debris. He was just sitting outside on an old stone bench, which had a backrest that seemed to stand the test of time. What he was doing there he didn't know. It was probably just because it looked nice, as with many other places that aren't inside city walls or within council hallways. A strange sensation came over him, and he began to see all manner of visions that were of beings coming to this reality interdimensionally, and who were highly proficient in magic, and that this time occurred when new magic was going to become available. The magic was light star and dark side magic, and it was going to cause a great rift in the balance of the world. This is why the Archon for 230 years were elevating the magical resonance of the earth by terraforming great electricity generating trees to be grown. This event was StarLore, and Ain was receiving the prophecy of it, about how the world had reached a state where this new magic could be used while simultaneously other beings from other realms come into this reality from the past, precisely around the middle of the first century of the second millennium. These beings proved that reality was in fact a digital universe, and that a truer reality existed elsewhere somehow. Ain thought this would be appropriate to share with the king. Although they could talk to one another with their minds whenever, it would be better if it came in person. Ain gestured some hand signs, and in an instant, after going through a portal, was suddenly in the king's throne room. He marched past the pillars, partially lit with torch scones, until he reached the king, and spoke. There's going to be an event where a fluctuation is reached, and new magic called Light Star and Dark Star magic will be available to be harnessed, and it comes from the stars and the void between. Around the same time, other humans claiming to be real, and this reality digital, will ascend into this reality, which proves the digital simulation idea. The king thought long about this. The magic didn't concern him. It was whether these beings were real or not, whether they are lying. Regardless, the king said, it doesn't matter because those beings would only be coming here to learn how to make their own reality better. The magic, though, I suspect the light stars will try to use it against us if we do not cower to their will to destroy reality by first unifying to destroy the Archon and their pyres that maintain this world, continued the king. I trust, though, that all of the elders of the Darkstar clans will seek to embrace this new power to defend against the Lightstar way and will. Ain agreed. I must go to the Lassity High Council to inform them of this vision, and he left. Ain arrived at the Lassity Council room that was half cylindrical upwards and half domed at the top, where it stretched back to the upside down trapezoidal narrow entrance. A great pyramidal mindless descent of steps occupied the space between the entrance and where the council sat in a ring under the curved dome walls for members to walk along at different heights and lines. A flat ring that could only fit a few people standing was at the bottom of these steps. Ain from the entrance walked along the steps that ran at a 45-degree angle to the wall and climbed higher until the floor leveled out and he reached the members. They all looked at him. They knew him well. They must have expected he'd had a vision, and they know he's the best in land at prophesizing based on what he said about how the Creator created this universe, and were willing to listen. I've had a vision of new times, pronounced Ain. There will be an event called StarLore, where electromagnetic energy has allowed the state of magic to be accentuated, allowing for new magic known as Light Star and Dark Star magic to be utilized, along with beings from interdimensional realms coming here, claiming that we're all in a digital simulation. They all looked stunned. They thought whether catalysts such as Darkstar trickery or an Archon scheme, but to no avail as they trust Ain's word. Some in the council from Geocity, Aquid, Pyrodome, and Aeronaut left after that to probably relay the information. Those who remained talked more with Ain about this prophecy. When is this supposed to happen? A High Light Elder asked. Ain replied, in a few years, in 2342. They question Aang about whether or not he thinks it to be real, and he thinks that we live in a digital simulation of some kind, though all is so magical and vast it matters not. They have heard of what he knows of the outside world, where scenes unfold at a much greater extent than here, greater battles and wars. So now they prepare for the oncoming magic and the people who are to come and play around in this world, as if it is their game by trying to make alliances with the other cities. But for the most part, the elders of the other villages and councils in the world just want things to remain as is without warring with the Darksires or Archon. Aang left the Lassity High Council and returned back to the cottage that he had had the prophecy at earlier in the day. It was much later, though the sun still beamed above the nearby tree lines that were enhanced by arcanic magic. He was laying down on the grass for a while, and all manner of flying insects hovered over him, slow-moving dragonflies, bees, and butterflies. The grass was soft, almost as it didn't grow under the base of an old pine tree he was under that's roots had begun to fester under all night nearby concrete. He thought he had done good work, but who knows what will become of the way in which it was heard by members of the council. Probably a lot of them would be planning for taking over control of the world from the Darksires with the newfound magic, or instead training idle as they ought. He could feel the branches of the pine tree sway in the wind above him, and hear the bristling of the little pine leaves rustling in the wind. The shadows cast over him were a pain from the warmth of the sun, though it was tepid enough anyway, and he found respite and solace. Then something occurred to him. Why else does Capital Steve sit alone all day, and just tell people who seek his counsel to go? Is he telling them something else subliminally, like why do birds fly up? Or is he hiding from the truth that he thinks he's the Grand Lizard Lord on purpose? Or is it just that he sees too many people asking, or unbeknownst to them, knowing that? He couldn't figure it out. He just shook his head. Probably what people think to stay sane, to not go violent enough, to have the vril summoned upon them. Again, possibly some lizard magic, as he can't figure out how it is that there doesn't seem to be a singular lizard lord. However, a variety of such from two classes, one brutal and one elegant. Cunning to both though, very efficient at seeking out filth in the world and slaughtering it. He begins to wonder what exactly the vril do all day, skulking in the depths waiting for entertainment or challenge. Suppose it matters not, considering what they do, attacking or evil. Many a dark warrior and foe has fallen to the vril, and only those who have survived are the most powerful. Soon it was night, and the moon shone bright, illuminating the trees, the leaves whistling in the soft wind with silver light. The cool breeze laid upon Aang's face, and he breathed deeply. Seemed the whole world was free of a burden with the sun gone. But it was getting cold, so he planned to go back to the warm fireplace of his abode in the company of his drone companion. He got up and waved some hand signs and apparated back to his place with the last of his energy. He knew he could only teleport such vast distances so many times per day without resting. And he was back at his door. He placed his hand on the hand scanner and the door opened, and the brittle smell of gadgets in construction wafted out. He went inside as he closed the door, and his eyes adjusted to the dim lights around the room. It was all one flat, open complex, except for the toilet and bathroom that was walled off. "Hey," said the drone, to which Aang replied, "Hey." He was going to lay down and go to sleep. As he lay in bed with the blankets pulled up tight, he thought to himself, what would become of the magic that was set to awaken throughout the world? Would it cause conflict between the rivaling cities, or would it unify them against the Archon? I guess he thought it made sense that the Darksires, those who occupy Dacity, the steel city of the moon, would see the reasoning in joining with the light stars of Lassity in their quest against ending the terraformation. And if the plight against the Archon ends, well then there would be wars without them, to occupy the dark side's lust for power, whom the light sides will use to end existence. Maybe he thought that it would be best for the cities to rival over their differences with the new power and allow the Archon to remain, so that the dark sides are inevitably coerced into destroying reality with the Archon gone. The balance of power that exists currently with the Archon and their powers is immense. The dark sides could not hope to overcome them without the aid of the light sides and the other elementals. He didn't know what to think, but he presumed he ought to speak with the king about it in the morning. He awoke to a red glow. It was his drone looking over him. Hey. Aim was tired. He shrugged it off. Got it playing like a Kano. He tried going back to sleep, but murmured back under the covers. The robot went away and stood back in the containment area. It must be time to see the king. He got up and made his bed, ear looking at a weapon he had been working on. It was a sniper rifle. He shot many people with such a weapon, most of which revived. Something about seeing things before they happen makes him a good shot. The kettle was boiling while he looked out the window. It was a cold day. Rain tampered on the window pane as outside was drenched with a thick rain. He could see the rain dousing the windowsill to a flood, but inside was kept dry. It seemed it would keep up for hours, so he got his light umbrella, a neon pole with an umbrella on top, and left. The ground was muddy from the rain, though patches of grass danced about around trees that neighboured the houses and the street. Lush deep green leafage rolling into pouring rain. He noticed how things always seemed pretty, or maybe it was just the light from the umbrella. He came eventually to the tavern, Den City, a den for people to sit. He went inside and took his hood off, and raindrops shimmered off. The people there looked at him, as if to say they all wanted to ask him something, and then continued their business. Sitting down in the booths were all sorts of rugged and wanted-looking people, scum and villainy, but they paid no attention to Ain anymore. He wandered about to a seat in a booth in the far corner, with some people he talked to frequently. Hey, he said as they greeted him back, and Ain began to tell his friends of the shift that was beginning to occur. They were stunned. They cared not much for the notion of the world being a digital simulation, as it's big and great enough as it is. They were delighted to be using magic associated with the celestial stars or the space between. Up until that point, people would traditionally stick to a particular element, so this is basically a calling for others to enhance their magical prowess. They gladly thanked Dane for his apt announcement, and they called for the waiter for a drink. He was drinking a tasty tonic, like a lemonade. Some others drank the same, some drank beer. Nonetheless, he was drunk soon, and the rain continued. He discussed to great extent his thoughts on what he had yet to tell the king, that maybe it would be best if the light sides were just rid all, whilst they maintained their want to end existence before they lost the will to end it, so that they don't turn reality into an all-encompassing piece without distinction. And they thought that it seemed possible that the light sides are meant to be destroyed. However, it seems to be so that the Archon will keep terraforming this world, and who knows how over-encompassing it will all be in time, that we may need to help the light sides in the end. This is what they discussed in great length and detail. They thought they ought to just war with the light sides against the Archon and hope that the Archon cannot ever be defeated, as for the light sides and dark sides to have to war between themselves once again. Aim was beginning to leave to go see the king, as he could feel he was being called, when his friend stopped him and thanked him for the information. It was basically a sign of the times for war against the Archon, which is probably what the Archon always wanted, as per why they sit idle in their towers, growing trees. The rain continued. However, was lighter than before, though still no sun poked through. He was rudimentally protected from the shower by the umbrella. He continued up the path, along the steep hill that rose slowly, passing all manner of buildings that divided the rain amongst the footpaths. He eventually reached the ramp and began ascending it. There was just flat concrete. The scene walking up was awe-inspiring, breathtaking views of a slow, dreary-looking cityscape caught in a rainy day. He thought as to why he walked, but the prettiness of things and the alleviation got to him. When he got inside, he passed a tickling echo of blue lightning-like streaks on the columns until he reached the king. They discussed what Ain spent all day talking with his friends about, the light stars and the star magic, about how they ought to fight indefinitely with the light stars against the Archon. They reasoned how it must have been the whole idea of the Archon to have the two most opposing sides team up against him. As to what the purpose is, it probably has something to do with the outside worlds. They thought how maybe the Archon planned to conjoin with the humans who seek them out for some military-esque expedition into outer space. But how could they know what lie ahead for them involving the Archon? The Archon are a funny bunch, it seemed to them. How they sit idle in their pyres terraforming the world, almost waiting for humans to unite against them. They both agreed with each other to try and unify all humans against the Archon to stop their terraformation. Because if left going for too long, the world would collapse into darkness, like that surrounds the pyres. This is what the light stars fear, that the terraformation won't stop, and there will be unprecedented magic that causes humans extinct. How could what the Archon planned be known? Ain left after a parting, and as he exited he passed the iridescent cold columns sparkling with cyan blue light before he reached a hallway lit with torches between the front door and the hall columns. The rain had stopped. There were puddles everywhere, and trickles of rain still fell from the high places of the Capitol building. The sun shone through the clouds, calming the land with its hues of light. He passed on towards home. As he went down the ramp, he could feel himself walking into the earth with an accelerated downforce from the ramp. Aiden noticed some children playing in the sun that peeked around the building. They were playing handball. Soon he was ace, but he had to get home.